members of the World War II airborne demonstration team as they drop from our C-46 Commando in a traditional static line drop as would have been used by American airborne soldiers during World War II. The World War II Airborne Demonstration Team and Foundation was formed to honor and serve the memory of the men who fought and died to preserve America's freedom during members of airborne units of the United States Army. The activities of the Foundation also recognize and honor those who served and survived that conflict. Exhaust, the sound of freedom. Right now is our SNJ and T-17 take to the sky. Is also the sound of freedom, but from about 1942 or thereabouts. Mr. Kevin Sunabal, one of our newer pilots, Mr. Mike Hogan. So what we have here are two primary trainers and two liaison aircraft flown for us by, I don't have his last name, unfortunately. His first name is Butch. He's one of our newest pilots, and I will have to check with our chief pilot, Mr. Mike Spaulding, to verify his last name for you. But the biggest difference is mostly in its construction, and of course it was built by a completely different company, but it has that typical sort of high-wing, single-engine, light civil aircraft look to it. Now, passing over the museum's airfield is our beautiful yellow PT-17, better known as the Stearman, a very popular plane both in its day and even to this day for commentary as the planes pass over our airfield. I'll focus on one at a time, and then I think that will be the most effective way of giving you some plating. Rounds from small arms fire would pass clean through the canvas covering of the airframe, so they installed steel plates on the floor, which was strictly against regulation, but at least helped to protect the crews somewhat against small arms fire on the ground. The plane was very effective in its use for forward air control and military theater by helicopter, but how could you do that during World War II when there really was no practical helicopter available yet? The L-5 could land in a very short distance and take off in an equally impressively short distance. As a matter of fact, believe it or not, in some of the canopies of some of the trees were so thick and substantial enough to be able to bear the weight of steel decking that improvised landing strips were actually installed on the treetops. Planes would land, collect their cargo, usually a wounded soldier, and depart as quickly as they had arrived. Taking off now, one of our first European aircraft taking to the skies, a Messerschmitt Bf-108. Very popular sport plane and liaison aircraft, and the ancestor of the Bf-109. Venerable trainer in its own right, sort of the German equivalent to the PT-17. As I was saying, both the de Havilland DH-C1 chip. Something to look for when you watch these de Havilland planes. You'll see another one taking off right now, the de Havilland Tiger, identical. Almost identical, and yet more than a decade apart in their design. That Tiger Moth, the stalwart trainer of the British Commonwealth throughout World War II, and believe it or not, there was even a desperate plan to arm them during the war in defense of Great Britain. J2 this afternoon. This plane also participating in the museum's ride program, although not this weekend. Plane rides are available for purchase with the SNJ, so if you're interested, perhaps in a future flight, that the tactics they evolved to counter the German threat were aided by the fact that German pilots were afraid of tearing the wings off of their Bf-109s. Therefore, when they would go into a dive, they would pull out far sooner than they might otherwise, and that would mean that the pilots of Hurricanes and Spitfires, if they would just hold with the pilot long enough, they might be able to catch him as he came out of his dive far sooner than he might otherwise have done had the wings been of more substantial construction. This is actually a Nord. What happened was, during the Second World War, France's entire air industry was turned over to the Germans. All native French designs were essentially built in Germany and sent to Argentina to establish another assembly line. Mr. Yagan may cut it short. I'm not sure. We'll see. Yep. No. Yes. Maybe. Maybe not. We'll find out. Yes, he's going to taxi back close in so that you can get a nice look at this well-preserved example. Now, this particular plane was actually used by Jimmy Davis Flying Services as a crop duster until 1968, following its wartime service. Many Stearmans were used in such roles as crop dusters, but now in the wings and in the tail. And as a matter of fact, the BF-109 incorporated the exact same demountable wing structure as the BF-108, much to the consternation of Emmy BF-108 pilots in the course of the Battle of Britain. Going up against the Hawker Hurricane and the Supermarine Spitfire would quite often find themselves going into a sharp dive, from which is a well-traveled plane. She's been around the world, as a matter of fact, serving as trainer for various air forces. I think she's even been to Singapore, if I remember correctly, and was built originally in 1940 by the Morris Motor Car Company. This is not unusual. It's the Polikarpov PO2, the distinctive note of its 5-cylinder radial engine puffing away for all it's worth. The Fokker 44 was designed by a man named Kurt Tunk, who was perhaps one of the greatest aeronautical engineers of his generation, regardless of whose side on which he was serving. The plane was built at the Fokker facility in Bremen, and as I said, delivered to Argentina to establish a license-built production line in that country. Many more would later be built in Argentina. The plane has been around the Old Warden, the aerodrome of the Shuttleworth collection in Great Britain. A far cry from the aircraft currently in the air, we see taxiing down our runway now the WWII Catalina of the Military Aviation Museum. The Havilland Tiger Moths would serve throughout World War II as trainers, and the PO2, the distinctive green biplane, its dark green coloration, you can see actually it's today carrying 2 crew members with a gunner in the rear compartment. The Polikarpov PO2 would have carried originally a 5-cylinder M11 Shvetsov 100 horsepower radial engine. You compare that with the massive radial engines, 2 radial engines carried by our PBY-5A, and I can see they come a long way to be with us on these occasions, but we're very happy to have them. And I know that you'll enjoy the sight of our PBY-5A when she What's so remarkable about the PO2 is the longevity of the design. Originally introduced in the late 1920s, this plane remained in production until 1959. That's a 30-year production record. As a matter of fact, the Polikarpov PO2 holds the record for being the most Soviet something to use in a pinch, I guess you could say. But when it came time for the Second World War, short of resources and in desperate need of aircraft to fill in the gaps as they was expected to be used in the event of an invasion of Britain. Polikarpov PO2s were fitted with munitions, light bomb loads. Members of the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, composed entirely of women, who were notorious for their daring and their low-altitude night raids on German rear positions. even though Catalina. Back now. Again, they can't hear your applause, but they would appreciate a wave as our pilots return. Back taxiing now in succession our Messerschmitt Bf 108, actually a French-built stabilizer. Mark that carefully, folks, because you're going to see it again. And then, following not so close behind, she takes her own time. Is the museum's Polikarpov PO2, again with Mr. Robert Boone Powell in the cockpit, and we notice well that he has with him a tail gunner. Looking for all the... I have it at the announcer's stand, so if you could please return to the stand and collect your room key at your convenience, room 125, and if you're staying at a Quality Inn in the area. Thank you. Around a bit after having been separated from service and wound up in Seattle, Washington. She then came back to New York before heading down to Miami and eventually finishing up her service flying in Ecuador, Atlantic flight. Relatively uneventful. This long-distance ferry flight took place in 2000. The WWII has actually been a part of the Military Aviation Museum. This aircraft essentially is the direct ancestor, as far as the mission she performed, as the venerable Grumman A6 Intruder, a plane with which Mr. Sinibaldi is all too familiar. Following close behind, the SPD Dauntless, designed by Ed Heinemann, a man who would go on to achieve great fame. With the notable exception of the 84 Skyraider, what you are looking at is the FG-1D Corsair, severely damaged in the Battle of Coral Sea, returned to the fray after its emergency refit, only to be pummeled again by Japanese attacks. She was damaged severely, but continued to launch aircraft, able to recover her airplanes, and was steaming at 20 knots. Unfortunately, having contained the damage, she came under attack yet again by Kate torpedo bombers from the Japanese aircraft carriers, and was eventually crippled beyond repair and had to be abandoned. Coming into view, and as I said, this particular AD-4 carries the markings of VA-195. The last Navy employed a closed bomb bay. The torpedo that she carried was contained within this bomb bay, unlike most other torpedo bombers of the era. In later years, the U.S. Navy used weapons externally, as did the SPG Dauntless. And as I've said previously, this is one of only 2 airworthy Dauntless aircraft in the world today. Today provided to us courtesy of the Dixie Wing of the Commemorative Air Force. The FG-1D Corsairs, they could absorb a lot of damage, but they were much more useful in terms of carrier operations. That's not to say that they were not successfully operated Hawker Hurricanes and Supermarine Spitfires. You can see the TBM Avenger demonstrating its bomb bay doors for you this afternoon in combat, and with all but one of them having been destroyed, it was an inauspicious beginning. Dauntless dive bombers continued to serve effectively with the United States Navy and the Marine Corps in limited numbers until the end of World War II, although their effective life as a combat aircraft ended of the battle. Douglas Devastators were supplanted by the TBM Avenger, and the Brewster Buffalo passed it. The Wildcat, the Avenger, and the Dauntless. We're very happy to provide for you this demonstration of naval air power, circa 1942-43. Virginia Beach, actually all... The TBYs were responsible for helping to stop the Japanese invading fleet at the battle. TBM Avengers were so good that they later became adapted for the anti-submarine warfare mission, and in fact it was in that configuration that this TBM was originally built. They were later supplanted by another Grumman design, a hunter-killer pair, the Grumman Guardian.
And do that. I also have to point out the side stuff. I mean, the airplanes are fine, and what we're doing with them is fine. But Josh earns a 200-yard sprint award today because he also flew in the Tiger Moth, and which is really pretty neat. We're a field. You can always come to the museum to fly. A beautiful red Waco that's parked in front of the main hangar. The Stearman, we call it the N2S.
Rated slats, which were used to great effect in the dive bombing mission that was undertaken by the Dauntless. Ed Heinemann, then presumably, was originally an employee of Jack Northrop.
Perfect three-pointer.
With hand-crank landing gear.
Hand-crank landing gear. It's apparently easy to lower, but it's difficult to raise it. Anyway, Ed Heinemann was once asked what was...
I had no idea. And that's the kind of trivia that you're not going to find in our airshow program, which is why we're here, Bob.
So when it came back here, it was definitely a matter of returning home. So we're very proud of that.
Now, here's an aircraft that did fly with the United States Navy and with distinction. And oddly enough, not a plane intended for operation from an aircraft carrier. Flown from the deck of the USS Hornet, the same carrier used at the Battle of Midway. And it's interesting, you look at a carrier... Twin radial engines thundering away as the B-25... We're also going to prepare for another demonstration by our...
Flak is one of those words that just become into the vocabulary all the way through it. What people don't really appreciate is the fact that it's actually an abbreviation. It's a Flieger Abwehrkanone. It's a big fancy way of saying anti-aircraft in German.
Even remotely close to airworthy status. This particular plane was rebuilt for this appearance in 2001. Carries a Wright 1820-80A engine with 14... And the B-64 passing over now. The aircraft was originally conceived in 1935. It went through some various developments and then was later... Enemy 50 was known as Torito, the little bull, perhaps because of its sort of bull-like or barrel-shaped fuselage, and the aircraft was Royal Thai Air Force. Unfortunately, because of Japanese activities in Thailand, this delivery did not take place. The aircraft were retained by the United States, where they were used as trainers, and as I stated earlier, only one of these 6 aircraft has survived, and of the aircraft sold to Peru, only one has survived. They were used in combat in wars between Ecuador and Peru.
One of the things you watch as you're doing this thing, of course, they're simulating strafing runs, which is what we're explaining. Strafing runs were a great deal more difficult when they're flying right into the ground, or your own bullets ricocheting off.
The museum's 340E is actually the cornerstone of its collection. It was the first aircraft whose restoration was undertaken. Some of its checkered past. This particular plane was over 100 miles in length, and that is where the P-51 truly had its day. Planes like the P-40 to compete at the high altitude to which the bombers flew. The P-40, having only a single-stage Allison 12-cylinder engine, was just not capable of achieving the range, the altitude necessary to fly escort missions.
One of the things those of us that are into the old aircraft to study and always have fun with is that airplane has so many names, it was almost incredible. The P-40 was the basic, and of course the U.S. system of putting a number after, a letter after it, doing that. That's an N. No, is that an N? No, we have a P-40N. It's an E. We have a P-40E. And doing that. The N looks very similar. And then you get involved in, was it a Kitty Hawk, a Sparrow Hawk, a
Tomahawk HE-280, which flew well before the Messerschmitt Me-262. But due to the vagaries of politics and various other things, fascinating to watch.
An absolutely wonderful airplane to do it. By the way, it's being flown by two guys that basically spent careers in the airlines, flying around a big jet transport. And I flew for the Luftwaffe. You kind of look at him, he's not that old. And it turns out, of course, he's talking about the modern Luftwaffe, went all the way through in this thing. He flew F-84 Thunder Flashes first, and then he wound up flying the F-1.
Believe it or not, this plane built by the same company that once bore the name of Sopwith, founded by Thomas Sopwith himself, who lived until 1989. Flying past now, the brilliant corrugated fuselage of the Ju-52 with its full-length ailerons. This plane, although it is somewhat ponderous in its size, is quite maneuverable. Unfortunately, this maneuverability did it no favors during World War II. The slowness of the aircraft precluded its ability to evade detection, but the plane soldiered on, as did the Hawker Hurricane, a plane whose first flight was in November of 1935. Many people see this of the Luftwaffe and their escorting fighters. Something else to be remarked about the Hawker Hurricane is that it was a much more primitive design in terms of the fact that unlike the Spitfire, which had a stressed metal skin, the Hurricane had an internal framework, tubular aluminum framework, on which were hung various panels, whether they be the pieces of the fuselage, the wing panels, etc. That's not to say it was not a strong aircraft. In fact, it's in the fighter role by newer designs and newer versions of the Supermarine Spitfire. Our Ju-52 would have encountered such aircraft in the Battle of Crete, in which Ju-52s were fielded in a large number, carrying complements of between 12 and 13 paratroopers. Again, it's very difficult for us to conceive of the actual scale of operations. We have one 88, and we're only dropping at the last moment as she passes back to her home behind the fighter factory. Actually, if you look at the plane up close, corrugation on it. This plane returned to the air in 2013 after an 8-year restoration, and we will fill you in on all the details of her story once she takes to the sky. Mr. Mike Spaulding in the cockpit again. I wish I knew who that lucky person was. Yeah, 3. Looks like the Germans were a little bit too much for him today. The facility of Germany at the end of the war. And they resorted to using underground factories, some of the largest of which were actually in the Harz Mountains, creating strange and eerie underground caverns for the manufacture of aircraft like the ME-262 and the Focke-Wulf 190. Our Battle of Britain flight today, our de Havilland Mosquito forming up with our Hawker Hurricane. And you just can't keep those Germans down. The de Havilland EH-98, powered by two Rolls-Royce Merlin engines and the Hawker Hurricane, whose first flight was in 1930. A round of applause and a wave to Mr. Dave Morris of our Yak-3 today, powered by an Allison V12, not the engine that the original Yak would have carried. This is, however, an original Yak-3 in the sense that it was built by the Yakovlev Design Bureau in the 1990s. They retained all of the original jigs and manufacturing equipment up to that time, and in the post-Soviet era, a little strapped for cash, they decided to re-inaugurate manufacture of the Yak-3. That would kind of be like General Motors putting the '59 Cadillac back into production just because they knew that people would buy it. So this is a new-built, authentic Yak-3, again today flown for us by Mr. Dave Morris. As I was saying about KA-114, familiar if you think about it, a lot like the A-6 Intruder, named for the very mission pioneered by this aircraft, and that being the Intruder mission. The Havilland Mosquitoes were used to great effect on the markings of John Haviland, an American volunteer with the RAF during World War II. John Haviland is noteworthy for having been the only known American volunteer to have flown in the Battle of Britain, to have successful recovery of our CH-98 Mosquito by Mr. Mike Spaulding, chief pilot of the fighter.